All right, hello everyone, and welcome back to another installment of Brothers and Boss Battles, a video game showdown. This is a podcast where my brothers and I discuss video games new and old. I'm Anthony, and along with my brothers, Pete and Tom, we're hoping for another lively video game discussion. For those that are joining us for the first time and may not know, let me tell you how the show works. We take a category or genre of games and select 3 games within that genre or category. We review a game one episode at a time and discuss everything about that game. Its story, music, controls, lore, impact on the gaming community, and whatever else. After those 3 episodes, our 4th episode is our Bro Down episode, where the 3 previously discussed games go up against each other, and us 3 brothers will argue which one should come out on top. Last week, we started our next category of games, which were spin-off Pokemon games. And for that category, we discussed Pokemon Snap, released on the N64. For our second game in the series, we are going to be discussing Pokemon Trading Card Game. This was released initially in Japan on December 18th, 1998 for the Game Boy Color, but it came to North America on April 10th, 2000 for the Game Boy Color. It was then available on November 13th, 2014 on the 3DS Virtual Console, and finally was made available on the Switch Online for August 8th, 2023. Let's start off with some initial thoughts here. Pete, why don't you begin?
Alrighty. So we did own this back around the time it was originally released. I I didn't really have a lot of vivid memories playing this game a lot. Which probably means I didn't necessarily enjoy it that much as a kid. But having gone back to play it for this episode, I played on the Switch, the Game Boy online package that they have, and I had I had a lot of problems with the game, but that's not to say that I didn't have fun uh, at times playing the game. So I'll leave it at that for now.
And before we continue, I just want to point out this was developed by Hudson Soft and published by Nintendo for those that don't know. All right, Tom, give us your initial thoughts, please.
Yeah, so I was a big fan of the physical trading cards back in the day. And I think, Pete and I both were. Um, we bought a lot of packs and always if there was like a Christmas gift or something, I remember that was like kind of like a go-to for people to get us back in the day. Anyway, so I feel like this game should have been kind of right up my alley. I do like the act like the premise of the game, like when you're playing physically with the actual cards. I think that's a much more enjoyable way to play the game. But given what they were working with on the small like Game Boy screen and technical limitations of underpowered hardware, I think they were able to pretty recreate the essence of the game pretty well. But yeah, I mean, like B said, that there are issues, and we'll get into it.
And Tom, did you also play on the Switch Game Boy availability?
I did.
Yeah. All right, I'll give my thoughts. Yeah, same here. I played on the Switch. It's weird because I kind of feel similar to you guys. I had issues with the game. I still found it fun and I still found it interesting as someone who never really got into playing the card game. Uh, to see how it, you know, we'll see what that was all about because I played the standard RPGs, but or at least some of them, but never really played the card game. I know you guys, I always saw you with your collector's books and things like that, but and I did think the cards were cool. So it was cool to get that end of it, but there were a lot of things in the game that sort of annoyed me. And we'll get into it, but I'm still glad I played this. Um, I'll just start with the very basic plot of this, and then we could get into more of our opinions on other aspects of it. But you play as a character, Mark, and he has an ambition of becoming the world's greatest Pokemon trading card game player. He has a rival named Ronald who has a similar goal. Um, and essentially, the object of the game is to defeat 8 club masters, which were comparable to the gym leaders in the standard RPG games, and earn medals as opposed to badges, and then defeat 4 grandmasters as opposed, which was comparable to the Elite Four, and then the champion, which eventually is Ronald. Um, and that's essentially the game. You go to each of the different districts, which all corresponds with a Pokemon type, and you try to beat the leaders there to get their the medals, and then you eventually go off to beat the to try to beat the 4, and then your rival. So you guys both seemed a little circumspect about some aspects of this game. Why don't we why don't we just talk about like the interface and the controls and some more of those technical items first?
Yeah, so one thing that I did, I'll start off with a compliment. One thing that I did like was that you could, in the settings, you could speed up the animations or sorry, speed up the text and remove the battle animations just because they were kind of useless in this game, like those little animations that played.
Oh boy,
So
I have to cut you off because that was going to be one of my biggest technical complaints was pressing the button continuously to try to get and being so annoyed that that didn't speed the text along. So I'm
yeah,
very
yeah,
unhappy to hear that that was an option that I did not take advantage of. So
yeah,
continue.
yeah. Well, so those were the good, the positive things that I can say for now. Yeah, I mean, I don't really have anything as like that's much of a complaint for the interface and controls. It's more about specific gameplay stuff,
Hmm.
which I'll hold for now.
Pete, anything to add? I have one other thing to add as a compliment to the to like sort of just the interface and gameplay. Anything?
Not really. The one thing I will say, this actually really didn't impact me. Um, but I wish you could put the same card in multiple decks.
Mhm.
I was gonna say that as this, but not.
In this section.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because that to me is more of like a gameplay limitation or something. But
I
yeah, I mean,
guess.
since you
Yeah.
brought it up, I
Yeah.
mean,
I was thinking
it's
from the perspective of just like
Playing the game, the
navigating, no,
gameplay.
navigating menus and making things slow, unnecessarily slow and annoying.
Right.
That's,
Yeah, so we'll get it. We'll
yeah,
we'll we'll talk about that. I want to just briefly say on the interface. I love the fact that you just when you go to the map, you just go to the various different, what are equivalent to gyms. You don't have to traverse land and run into wild Pokemon and all of that. You just go to the different gyms, face the few, you know, sort of underlings. Well, they're not gyms, but whatever they are. But you face the underlings, and then you face the main person, and then you get the badge or the medal if you win. So so
yeah,
I thought that was really
they
cool.
streamlined it.
Yeah, I yeah, it was definitely
they're
nice and
clubs, by the way.
clubs. There we
Clubs.
go.
Clubs.
I just felt a lot of things very tedious. Like apparently you are able to speed it up, which I didn't do. But even like you have to draw 7 cards, and they draw out each one for each player. Like everything was just took so long, and I just thought it was so unnecessary. So that stuff I didn't like. But Tom, I'm assuming that that was also sped up if you said it correctly, or
I don't think the dealing the cards was they had like the animations when you use an attack. Like let's say you used Thunder Wave, and it would have like a little
Wave of
you know
Thunder.
wave of thunder appear on the screen, so you could remove that. Like and
Uh,
it's can
yeah,
significantly cut down some of the time the match takes.
yeah. Well, we'll get into that later. But all right, talk about the deck splitting and all of that.
Yeah, I just found it annoying that you had to like because the way that I approached the game was to make a new deck for each of the clubs. Um, so I was constantly switching up my deck. But there were a lot of cards that you want to keep between each iteration of your deck, like your trainer cards, like for the most part. And but some of the energy cards too are normal Pokemon. Like I padded a lot of my type decks with normal Pokemon, and then you have like the colorless energy. So like I wanted those in every deck, but I couldn't reuse them to make a new fire deck or a new water deck. So I just had to like after every club that I finished, I would then go into my deck and remove all of like the fire Pokemon, for example, and then replace them with the same amount of water Pokemon. And then I would just remove all my fire energy cards and replace them all with water energy cards. Like it was just
Yeah.
tedious for no reason.
Yeah, and the other annoying thing with that was that you couldn't save a deck with less than 60 cards because that's the amount that you need. Uh, so you'd have to like switch things that you didn't want into that other deck so you could take it out and put it into the deck you really wanted. And just before we continue and Pete gives his thoughts on this aspect of it, just for the listeners, if you don't know, you gathered various decks as you proceeded through the clubs and talking to Dr. Mason, uh, and whatever. So you had a bunch of cards, but in order to play, you needed both the Pokemon and then energy cards. You put the energy card onto the particular Pokemon card, and they were able to use attacks based on the amount of energy it took for those cards. The And then there were some like trainer cards, which were sort of special cards that allowed you to do different things, like go through the whole deck and pull out the energy cards you wanted, or draw two cards instead of one on your turn. So there were various different things like that. But it gave you four slots to make four different decks. But like Tom said, a lot of times you wanted to repeat cards, but you couldn't. So this sort of tedious limitation made that portion of it, the game, a little bit annoying.
Yeah, so I mentioned that it wasn't really a big problem for me, and that's because I approached the game in the opposite way that Tom did. I basically used one deck throughout the whole entire game. I did change out it just for one particular battle.
Yeah, so it's funny. As the game went on, I kind of did what you did, Pete. I just kind of like used that deck. I had four decks built, but kind of would just put all of the stuff I didn't want into those decks, and then pull the ones I wanted into the main deck. Because I just felt that like I just wasn't. I either had too many Pokemon and not enough energy, or vice versa, and not the training cards I wanted if I had four full decks. So it just I had to change it up a little bit.
Yeah, I felt like at the very beginning of the game, maybe you kind of had to just calibrate like what is the appropriate amount of Pokemon cards and evolved Pokemon cards and energy cards and trainer cards. But I feel like once you kind of hammer that down, there wasn't a big reason to change out decks. Maybe if you had your deck centered around this one type and you were going against a type that it was weak against, but other than that, once you have
Yeah,
one, I found once I had a strong deck, there was no reason really to swap out.
because it's Pokemon, I think we should talk about what decks we started out with.
Oh, definitely. I started with the Squirtle, the water deck, and that's the one I rolled with throughout the entire game. Do
So
you want to
would
get
you?
into like the
What?
features of our deck or the highlights or?
Sure. Well, Tom, would you start with? I started with Charmander.
I did Charmander as well. I always start with fire Pokemon in like the main RPGs, so I just
So
carried that logic over.
yeah, I was a Bulbasaur user in the original games, but because I always felt he got left out. So, but
I I
but
started with Squirtle because the Blastoise was my favorite
yeah,
actual card that we had growing up.
mm, it's funny because I wound up building a very strong water deck, even though I started with Charmander. Um, and what I didn't like about this game, and just because my main immersion in Pokemon was Red and Blue, that the it took me a while to figure out that the grass Pokemon were not strong against water. It was actually the electric Pokemon in this game.
Yeah, the weaknesses and resistances are a
Different.
little different. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, the resistances were horrible when you like thought you had an attack and then
Yeah,
Yeah,
after.
yeah.
yeah, it was a little weird because so like rock Pokemon like Geodude, for example, and Machop, they were both considered like fighting Pokemon in this game,
Right. There was no
but they
rock.
have
Yeah.
but they have different weaknesses.
Right,
So
but
it was kind of weird because they're both designated as fighting Pokemon,
yeah. Yeah, I definitely made a few
and
mistakes.
they're both like would do double damage to who's ever weak against fighting, but the same logic didn't apply for their resistance. Was kind of like confusing.
What do you mean whoever's weak against fighting? You Pokemon masters should know that. What was it, flying? Uh,
Well, in the you mean
No,
the trading
no.
card game?
well, I guess in real life, quote unquote, and the trading card game.
Well, flying is weak against rock, but resistant to fighting.
So
In
This
the
isn't
fighting,
that.
actual,
so
Yeah,
in other
in
words,
real life.
in real life, yeah.
fighting couldn't hurt rock, is what you're saying.
No.
Oh,
Oh,
I think we should move on. This is no relevant to the
oh.
trading card game.
yeah.
All right.
The
What do you
point
want to?
just was that like
Yes, the typings and the resistances and things are a little confusing because for multiple reasons.
You
yeah,
know what
I
I?
guess they didn't want to add like extra energy cards for
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
rock and
right.
whatnot.
You know what I didn't like about this game compared to like the RPGs was, like no critical hits, no misses, nothing like that. Because I feel like it sort of made portions of some battles boring because it was like you have one energy, they have two energy left. You hit them with with an energy that does 10, which is one bead that comes off. And then they're going to kill you the next time. It's like there's no chance they're going to miss, and there's no chance that your attack would have been a critical hit and done 2 damage. So it's like I don't know. I found that very very boring.
Yeah,
And
well, there were misses, right? Some moves require you to flip a coin. That's kind of the miss. And in the actual game, I think there are plenty of moves that are basically 100% accuracy. So unless you were, had some status effect like that lowered
yeah,
your accuracy, you weren't going to miss anyway. So that
yeah,
was kind
I
of.
guess.
I know what you're saying, but
Yeah. And they did have some of those status effects too, which was cool to see in like a card game. So
yeah, definitely.
yeah.
No, they just in general. I mean, and this isn't really. This is more a comment on the actual trading card game, but it was pretty, involved and in depth.
Yeah, I think Pokemon is actually viewed as one of the simpler, easier to get into trading card games, like when compared to like I don't know, something like Magic the Gathering or something. But yeah, I mean, I feel like they did a good job capturing the essence of Pokemon in the trading card game.
Yeah. They did, and the trading cards are such a big part of it, and that's sort of the Pokemon lore in general. I mean, and that's why I can't dislike this game, even though it was very frustrating for me. Um, I feel at the end of the day, and maybe this is like with cards in general, like even talking about like blackjack or poker or something, but it's like there's a lot of luck involved, and I felt there was a lot of luck involved in this game too. It's like even like it was annoying because in the battle against those final four, um, one of the guys very often because I lost against them a lot would have a Chansey to put out as his first Pokemon, which is great because the Chansey just absorbs hits and he's able to build energy on every turn for all of his other Pokemon on the bench. So it's like you have this Chansey, you have that the Chansey take all the damage, and then your whole the rest of your deck is pretty much built. So he's just coming out firing after that. It's I but unless he had 10 Chansey cards, I mean, it doesn't really make sense that happened that much. So it's like, is it an algorithm in the game, or is it just like blind luck that is like or unluckiness on part of the player, i.e., me in this instance?
It did seem that a lot of battles, like I guess particularly like the gym leaders or club leaders, did use that kind of stall tactic a lot, where they would put out a Pokemon with a bunch of HP to just soak up damage, not even with no intent to even attack with it, and just build up like their bench and whatnot.
Yeah,
But my point is that things have to fall into place for that to be a winning strategy,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
it
yeah.
almost always seemed to fall out that way.
It probably, I mean, it probably wasn't completely
Yeah, random.
random.
yeah. So
Yeah.
I have a couple of comments on this. One about the algorithm on the randomness. I feel like a lot of people on the internet claim that the coin flips are rigged.
I would agree with them.
That is debunked. It's not true. The coin flips are basically determined before the match even starts. Like heads tails, and so you don't know, which player is gonna
Are you
require
talking about just for for the whole match?
the whole match. Yeah.
So you mean like
Gotcha.
attacks too? Like
Yeah,
attacks that
exactly.
require
Yeah.
the coin flip.
Yes. Yes.
It's I will say this though, and then I want you to continue, but I was facing someone had I think it was Courtney, who's the first club leader you faced, the fire one. She uses Ninetail, Vulpix and Ninetales, I believe. And Ninetales has an attack where you flip a coin 8 times, and for it's like a hit for every one. There was one time where she got it, so if it's heads, she hits you, and if it's tails, not. There was one time where I believe it was either 7 out of 8 or 8 out of 8 were tails, and I didn't get hit at all. And it was like, okay, like that was cool, but that was quite the exception. Most of the time, the coin flips worked against me.
Because of the internet perception, I actually recorded all my coin toss results for the final 5 battles,
Oh
and
wow.
it was virtually 50-50 in my favor, or
Oh,
50-50, give or take a couple.
wow. Okay, that's an interesting little experiment.
Yeah, a small sample size, but
Yeah.
like, so going back to sort of the using the Chansey to kind of just build up the bench Pokemon, and also related to your comment about a lot of sort of luck or chance, so to speak, being involved in the game. I felt the exact same way. And it's just your first handful of draws was just so critical to
Yeah.
whether you won or lost. And like, again, this is just one person's, me, uh, one person's experience, but like, I want to give an example. So the final, battles against the grandmasters and then your rival at the end, I beat all of them on my first try, or every time except for the I guess it was the electric one, because I was using the water one. And the first time I swapped out my water one, then I beat him. So anyway, and like the final 2 battles, I like steamrolled them. I beat them without even having to collect all the prize cards. Like I just beat him so fast. And then after I completed the game, I was intending to go back and just try to collect a few more cards, like as much as I could. And then with my water deck that I used throughout the whole game, I went to the fire club and faced one of the random trainers, not even the club master, lost 3 times in a row. Yeah, so that really shows you how kind of like random it is. I mean, I went through the whole game, kind of almost steamrolled to the final part of the game, and then I went back to face what should have been the easiest battle for me in the whole game based on the weaknesses, and I lost 3 times in a row.
Yeah, that was definitely a big problem with it. But like, again, that's like seems like a card game in general type of thing.
Yeah.
All right, let's take a
Yeah.
quick break. We'll give our answers to last week's mid-episode filler question about Pokemon spin-off games. All right, last week we discussed Pokemon Snap, and instead of a classic would you rather question, we asked, what's your favorite Pokemon spin-off game? We discussed Pokemon Snap last week. That's one of them. Today we're talking about Pokemon trading card game, and next week, oh wait, don't want to give that away just yet. The three of us, we kind of know what our answer is going to be, but we want to share those with you. And as a bit of a spoiler alert, but just don't worry, we're not giving the bro down away. Our favorites are not any of these 3 games that we've selected for this category, so not Pokemon trading card game, Pokemon Snap, or what our next episode game is going to be. So, Tom, why don't you start us off? What's your favorite Pokemon spin-off game?
Yeah, so this was a tough question. There's a lot of good spin-offs from this series, but I'm going to go with the original Pokemon Mystery Dungeon game, which they had, in true Pokemon fashion, they had two, which were, basically identical with a few minor tweaks between the versions. So they had Blue Rescue Team and Red Rescue Team. Yeah, these were cool games. This was a Nintendo DS game. But yeah, it was kind of a departure for the Pokemon series. It used a roguelike gameplay, which is a popular kind of gaming term these days, but I feel like it wasn't that popular back then when this game was released. So that was kind of cool. Yeah, and it was just kind of like, you play as the Pokemon and they can talk and whatnot. So it was kind of cool. It was like a little different than what you're used to in the mainline games, but obviously familiar in many ways. The Pokemon used attacks, that they would have learned in the mainline RPGs. But yeah, that was a fun one.
All right, Pete, why don't you give us your thoughts?
Yeah, so I agree with Tom. There are a lot of good ones, but I would have to go with the Pokemon Stadium series. The innovation of just being able to battle with your Pokemon from the Game Boy games, on the N64 and 3D was pretty cool. And it had some cool battle animations. It really felt like the battles in the cartoons and the cartoon episodes with the Pokemon battles were always the best ones. So it kind of felt like you were, playing those episodes in the cartoon. And, so we obviously had these games, Pokemon Stadium games, and the three of us actually participated in sort of like our own Pokemon League championship where we each had some of the Game Boy games and we collected and trained multiple parties of Pokemon, and then we had the tournament on the N64, which, made it much more awesome than just doing battles through the trading link cable on the Game Boys. But also they had some cool mini games. Some of them were really fun. I remember playing a lot of those. And I think, and you guys are gonna laugh at this, but I'm pretty sure Pokemon Stadium 2 it was that had this academy area or mode, whatever you want to call it, where you participate in lectures and take quizzes and
Did you do any math?
I don't know if there were any math-based questions, but it was about Pokemon battling, and it just it was Pokemon, so it was interesting and fun. It wasn't a lecture about European history. So anyway, and just finally one more point. I'm pretty sure, as I recall, the single player campaign type mode it got quite difficult near the end, and it was I don't know, when you were playing the Game Boy games, it was once you reached this couple of badges, it just felt like you were steamrolling everybody. So it was kind of refreshing to have challenging battles. So Pokemon Stadium.
Okay. Pokemon Stadium was a good one. I liked it for the fighting, the good graphical representation of your Pokemon from the Game Boy games, being able to fight people on that. I remember I had a cool Wailord that was wailing on these guys' Pokemon when we played. Anyway, I'm gonna have to go with Pokken Tournament, the sort of fighting game that was based off of a Tekken tournament. So I like that. Back then, fighting games were cool because it wasn't just study a combo and then hit someone until they, so they can't get an attack in. There was actually more fair and more where you could just pick it up and play it and still have fun. So fighting games were cool back then, and Pokemon was cool, and you combine the two, and it was made for a good game. So I'd probably say that's my favorite spin-off Pokemon game. All right, very cool. That's our favorite Pokemon spin-off games. Now back to another one in our main episode, Pokemon trading card game. All right, when we before break, Pete was telling us about how he agrees with the my point about the randomness of the game and gave an example there. And yeah, that was sort of a downside, but I don't see how you could make the card game any different than that. You know, it's like in
Yeah,
blackjack. Did you get a queen and a 10 on your first two or not, you know?
yeah. The draw the starting deck is really, I mean, this is an obvious statement, but it's it's really important because I mean there were so many times where like even like it went in my favor where my opponent would just start off with one basic Pokemon and have no one on the bench, and I would defeat that one Pokemon who probably had like 30, 40 HP or whatever, and then I just win the match because he has no one to replace that Pokemon with. So
Yeah,
yeah, I mean
no,
it swings both ways, you know.
I guess I felt it swung against me more, but I was trying to I was
maybe
gonna
your
try
card, maybe your deck
oh,
composition was not appropriate
I was
or
trying
optimized.
I was gonna try to convince Pete to do the math on whether if you gotten a tails on your first coin flip, if the next one is a higher probability you'd get a heads, but I he's told
Not
me that
based on real life.
he's told me that math doesn't work that way. So,
So starting, not starting,
but wait,
talking
I just
about,
have to with the
okay.
coin flips, and then we'll get into that. Whether it worked against or for you, did you feel it was like the same flips a lot of times in a row? Like for that nine tails thing I mentioned, to have 7 of 8 or 8 of 8 tails in a row, just like it doesn't seem probable. And there were a lot
Oh,
where it's like
it is improbable, but I guess,
it
the,
happened.
It's
yeah, it
possible.
happened.
Yeah.
It's possible.
Not
No, but you must have
probable.
had
It's
a,
possible.
you in playing this game, and I know you played it for many, many hours. You experienced lots of series of coin flips, and that won't happen once. So that sounds very reasonable.
All right. Before we belabor this point, go on to what you were
Yeah.
gonna say.
Um, I was gonna say a minor criticism about the start of a duel, and again, this is really, I guess, a comment more for the actual trading card game than the video game. But I just felt like there should have been a penalty for a mulligan. So like when you draw a zero base
Mhm.
Pokemon, and
They just make you draw again.
yeah, they just make you draw again. Exactly. This should I don't know. I just think there should be some mulligan where maybe you have to draw one less card next time, or
Yeah, because then you could like I see where you're getting at because you could purposefully construct your deck in a way that like it doesn't have that many basic Pokemon, but you only put like strong basic Pokemon there or
yeah,
whatever,
yeah,
and then so like it's like, oh well, I didn't get any, so I could just go again, like so that you always start with something that's really good.
yeah, yeah. You have a higher chance of starting with something that's really strong, and then so it's almost like tricking or manipulating the game a little, which I didn't like.
Another
But
thing
again,
that
that's the rule of the trading card game. So
yeah, um, I kind of do want to get into like what else. I mean, we could briefly talk about the graphics. I mean, it's just like those pixelated pictures of the cards. Really, it's not bad for the time or being on Game Boy Color, but there's nothing special
no,
about them. There's nothing bad.
no, it's not bad actually. When they have like the close up of the card, when you're
Yeah,
examining your card, it reminded me of some of the cards we had. It was
yeah,
cool.
yeah. And then
Yeah, they were pretty. I, I'm pretty sure a lot of them were like exactly like the actual physical cards. Obviously they looked a little worse because it's on a Game Boy.
yeah.
But
Yeah, so
but yeah, that was cool that they were able to copy that the artwork from the original cards.
yeah, so all the cards from the base set and then the first two expansion sets, Jungle and Fossil, are in the game. Now it's actually all of the cards from the Japanese version of these sets. I don't know how different the Japanese and American versions are. Um, not they're not very different, if at all. But
You,
but
you're
anyway, it's
you're talking about graphically or the moves that you
no,
have,
yeah,
or
yeah, everything. The actual card, graphically, the moves, the HP, the level.
Mm.
But anyway, so it's interesting to note that this is true of all of the cards except for two Pokemon are replaced with game only versions of the cards. And it was basically due to the complexity of these Pokemon's like abilities. So one of them was Ditto from the Fossil expansion set. And that's obviously because he uses transform and it was just hard to implement in the game. And the other one is the Electrode, which he had like an ability or a move that could he'll knock himself out and then turn himself into electric energy cards that you could attach to a bench Pokemon.
oh wow, that's an awesome move.
Well, he self-destructs,
Yeah.
so he
Oh
knocks himself
yes.
out.
Well, the self destruct is still in the game though, but it like damages every Pokemon
Yeah,
in
yeah,
your deck.
yes. So that was, I guess, also very challenging to implement. So they just made a simpler version of that card as well. I found that interesting. I don't know if you guys
Yeah,
did.
yeah.
Doesn't
No,
seem
that is.
Yeah, it's cool.
Wait, so that was
It,
in the. I just didn't get the setup. Is that was in the Japanese version, but not the
no, no, no,
North
no, no.
American?
The cards that are represented in the video game are basically the first three
Oh,
sets
packs.
of cards, but of the technically speaking, from what I read, it's of the Japanese version of the cards, the
Oh,
first
I
three.
see. I see.
But
Of
I
the
don't know if
actual,
it
you're talking about
of the
the
actual
actual
yes.
cards, yeah.
I just don't know if there are any differences between the actual Japanese cards and the actual North American cards.
Hmm. Did you guys find when using Pokemon that like mid evolved form was more useful than the fully evolved form on any of your characters? Because I know Pete's gonna disagree with me
Not
because
at all.
this was his guy, but I felt the War Turtle with for having bite that did 40 damage and only needed one water um energy and the other two could be whatever was an extremely useful move and character to use. Because it's hard. I mean, unless you put all of one energy in, it's hard to get four water or four whatever. And that's the other reason why
Yeah.
for the fire deck, Charizard was cool because he could convert any energy into fire. So for him, it was a little bit easier to use his main move. But I don't know. I was a very big War Turtle fan in this game.
yeah, well, I mean, the third level evolutions, they generally require four energy cards to use
Yeah.
their like main attack. So yeah, I mean, in that sense, the second level was more usable, just because it required less.
Hmm.
But yeah, I mean, there were times where like I was using Machop, Machoke, and Machamp a lot.
Yeah.
There were times where I got Machamp, and he just cleaned house with it,
Seismic
with
toss.
his ability. Yeah, so I mean, it was helpful to have them for sure.
Yeah, no, I know. And they had the most energy, obviously. So that was, and they all had their Pokemon moves, which could be useful.
But another thing, like
Pokemon
I
powers,
didn't,
sorry.
I didn't find myself having a lot of like, whereas I would have like three Machokes. I only had one Machamp card, so
Mhm.
didn't
Did,
really get to use them that often.
did you feel that was a good setup? Because I tried to cascade it like that, where I'd have like maybe four basics, three mid, and then like the full evolution. But I don't know if
I
that was a good strategy
I
or not.
no, I think that's the widely accepted
Oh, okay.
ideal setup.
It makes the most sense because you don't want to be stuck. Because there were times even using that strategy where I was like, I had all evolved forms and like one basic Pokemon of a completely different Pokemon, and then they'd knock me out, and that was it. Like the match was over in, three attacks. But, you know,
Yeah, I mean, it was challenging to get the third form, but the to me, I just felt like the better strategy was relying on the stronger Pokemon that was maybe a second form. So like my I, my like MVP was Gyarados.
Oh, I didn't even use him once in the whole game.
Oh, I mean, he was great because you just have to evolve him once, and he was
Yeah.
maybe not quite as strong as like those like Blastoise, but almost. Like he was really great, and it was just easier to get him, obviously, because you only
Yeah.
needed the Magikarp. You didn't need 2 levels before him.
Right. Right.
And since we're kind of talking about deck strategy, early on, I had while water was my main, I had some normal, of course, but then I also had I think some fighting and some psychic, and eventually I just had to scrap that idea because then you needed some psychic energy, then you
Mhm.
needed some fighting energy, and it was just you were just inevitably more often than not left with Pokemon of one type and energy cards surplus of a different type. So
So
I
you.
ended up just having water and some normal.
Oh,
And that's
okay.
it.
So you stuck with one because I tried to do what you did for much of the game, where I had like two types in a deck. But you're right. I think that's why I struggled early on, particularly, and why it took me so long to beat some uh clubs leaders because it was it just didn't work. And then when I kind of switched to using the strong fire Pokemon and I Charizard, and then for other times I used Psychic. I had the Abracadabra, Alakazam, Evolution Chain, and I was using Alakazam. So that was helpful too.
Yeah,
Um,
I think at first you kind of have to go with two types just because you don't have enough energy cards of a single type.
Yeah, it's
yeah,
true. There was a way to get I think it was like 10 energy cards of each type.
Yeah,
Um
in hindsight, that's probably what we all should have done. There's a train or a member
Climber.
in
Yeah.
I don't even know what they're called. Uh, a duelist. There's a duelist in the laboratory that you start where you can play him, and if you win, he gives you a booster pack, which is all energy cards. So yeah, I mean, probably the smartest strategy with this game is to just battle him a few times, stock up on energy cards, and then you can be on your way.
Yeah.
But so you mentioned your MVP before. I don't know that I have like a real MVP, considering that I switch decks a lot um, based on the types that I was battling. But I wanted to give a special shout out to two in particular. So there was Taurus. Um,
Yeah,
I used
I
him
used him
pretty
too.
much. I used him pretty. He was a staple in pretty much all my decks, actually. Um, just because of how versatile he was. He did pretty good damage. He was a basic Pokemon, had decent HP, and as I progressed through the game, I was getting a lot of those double colorless energy cards.
mhm.
So you could just like slap one of those on him, and then he can start attacking.
Yeah, there is a limit to how many you could have in a deck, I think though.
Yeah, I think it was like 4 or 5.
Yeah. Like
Yeah,
you couldn't have 20 double
Yeah,
colorless
no, but
energy
that's eight
cards.
or
yeah,
ten
yeah.
energy just in those 4 or 5 cards, so it's
Yeah,
useful.
yeah. But it's still you only have a 4 or 5 out of
Yeah,
what is it,
60,
50? 60?
60.
Yeah. But then, obviously also his attacks were energy of any type. So
Hmm.
if you didn't get a
Yeah,
double
right.
colorless,
Right.
then you can just use any on him. So yeah, he was really good. And I also wanted to call out Hitmonlee. Again, a lot of similar strengths in that he was a basic Pokemon and um, had decent HP and whatnot.
He
But
wasn't
also
fighting?
he had yeah, he's fighting.
Oh, I thought you said he was. Oh, he wasn't. No, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
Yeah, but so like the thing that I really liked about him is he had that move that deals 20 damage to any of your opponent's benched Pokemon.
Yeah, that was cool.
And because so many, so many of your opponents in this game would use that strategy where they put out a high HP Pokemon to just soak up damage, it was really useful to just knock out their benched Pokemon, while they're using this cheap tactic.
Yeah, as far like I had mentioned War Turtle already, and it's funny, Tom, your strategy was the complete opposite of mine in the sense that normal Pokemon and fighting Pokemon were the least two used by me. So It was the complete opposite. Even though I was a little bit familiar with that Hitmonlee move. But yeah, I mean, War Turtle, Charizard, and then like sort of a sleeper Pokemon for me that I wound up using a lot, particularly towards the end, was Jinx. The meditate move was kind of cool because if you could hang in there, you could really keep multiplying your damage and knock out even some pretty strong ones. So I enjoyed using Jinx.
That's cool. Yeah, so just to complete mine, Gyarados was obviously the top. I had Blastoise. I had that evolution, so Blastoise was very good for me too. And then I used Lapras a lot. He wasn't great, but at the beginning he was pretty good. And eventually, when I got an Articuno card, I forget from where, then I was using Articuno as well. It was pretty good.
Speaking of Articuno, they had I think it was the last member that uses him. It's Jack. He also it's also strategically built his deck where he had that move where he could make them go back to the bench and then back onto the bench because his Pokemon power was to freeze every time he like came from the deck. Not bench, could go back to the deck and bring him back. So like that was sort of a strategic use. So Articuno was a little bit annoying there.
Yeah, if I'm not wrong, there were two Articuno cards in the game, and I had the other one.
Mm, okay. So we've kind of been interspersing like standard talking points for random games and just kind of ad-libbing on our decks and strategies and stuff. But I'd like to go back to one of those other categories and discuss the music a little bit. Because this game, unlike Pokemon Snap, and not to compare because we're not in the Bro Down episode, but this game had some really, I feel like, good music and classic sort of Pokemon sounds.
Oh yeah, I agree. Like the music got a little repetitive, but some of it was really good. Um, the like the map when you were on the map screen, that was very good. And just when you were in the lobby area of all the clubs, it was like identical for all the clubs. That was also really good. Once you got into like the actual club room where you were doing the dueling, those were more hit or miss. Um, but like the main music, so the map, the lobbies, and then inside the dueling, those were
Yeah.
really good, I thought.
Yeah, this yeah, the music was definitely good. I wonder if it was like even better, just or felt more like Pokemon because of being on the Game Boy, so it has that similar kind of sound quality to it that the original Pokemon games did.
Right.
But yeah, it was definitely noteworthy.
It was alluded to before. Why don't we talk about like we mentioned briefly the trainer cards and how those were sort of, specialty cards that allow you to do different things um on your turns in addition to battling and drawing energy cards or placing energy cards. Anyone have any thoughts on the trainer cards? A favorite, a least favorite, a useful, least useful?
I didn't use I didn't feel like any of them were like really effective that really helped me out a lot. I mean, I used probably the ones that most people use, like I think you could draw two cards.
That's Bill.
Bill, yeah,
Yeah, I like the energy removal one where you can remove from an opponent. That was helpful.
Yeah,
The one
definitely.
searching your deck for an energy card was came in handy.
yeah, that was good.
Yeah, I agree with both those.
Plus power I used a lot,
That I
where it
never
like
wound
adds an
up
extra
using.
10.
Yeah, that's a useful one. It always was used against me very strategically, but
It's all luck.
what about maybe you guys could help explain it for me, but those fossil cards, did either of you encounter them or use them at all or know what they do?
You basically use those as base Pokemon to evolve into the fossil Pokemon.
Like Omanite and those?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Oh, so
So
you
I never
needed to
used it.
so you needed to have those out to get those other Pokemon? Like
Yeah,
that's what
pretty sure.
oh wow.
I never even
Yeah, I didn't catch
considered
that, but
using
that's
that.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah, me neither. That was too much work.
Yeah. I Okay. All right. Well, at least I know.
True to Pokemon. So,
Yeah, yeah. That's just cooler in an RPG than a card game, though.
yeah.
So do
So
you
do you
guys
guys
know?
have your stats? Sorry, Ann. Do you guys have your stats for like how many cards you collected?
I have.
I don't have it on
So
me. Yeah, but go ahead, Tom.
mine was 180 out of 226, and I didn't make much of an effort to collect them all this
Oh
time
wow.
around anyway.
Okay. I had 196. Yeah, after completing the game. Then I had mentioned I was going to try to go back to collect more, and I got I think four more. So I got up to 200. But
Did
then
you
it just kind of
did you
became
fight a lot?
tedious.
Yeah. Did you fight a lot in the rooms that were to the left in the clubs?
I I used them a lot. Yeah, I fought, and then some people wanted you to trade cards with them, or
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. I was trying to do
yeah.
all that. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't do any of that. Like
Okay.
it got to a point where I wasn't even like going into that left room in some of the later clubs. I was just
Oh
going
wow.
straight up. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I
it's
definitely I didn't do any
go ahead.
trades. I don't have the amount of cards I got, but we I just want to call myself out and talk about how long. Actually, as of the recording of this episode, and I hope to have it done either by the release of this episode and certainly by the release of the Brodown episode, I have not completed the game. I did beat the final club members, um,
The Grandmasters.
the four grandmasters, sorry, but did not, but then lost to your rival. Um, so that's was that was stinky. But
Yeah, that's thing.
so because then they make you go back and fight them all again. So what I'm doing now, and I'll freely admit it, is I am using the save states, which I didn't use for the rest of the game. Um, but I'm just gonna use the save states, and I'm through three of the grandmasters, and to
I'm pretty
just
sure.
go
Do you even have to use the save states? Like even in the original game, I feel like after each one, when they give you the option to amend your deck before
yeah.
you go on to the
You could
next
you could
duel.
save. You could
I-
save after each. Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
okay. Oh, you can. All right, so then I
Yeah.
don't feel bad about using the save states because that's
No,
essentially
you
what I'm
shouldn't.
doing. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I have to beat Rod and then try to finally beat Ronald, and then I'll have collected all of the legendary cards that I sought out to do. But
So
anyway,
Tom, you.
I'm up to
So
like
Tom. Oh,
I was gonna say, just let me. I'm up to like
yeah,
24 hours of gameplay, and it's
that's a lot. I
Yeah,
don't know how many
that's wild.
hours. I don't know how many hours. I didn't note that, but it's much less than that. Much,
this
much
I
is
have
less.
mine was 8 hours, 47 minutes.
this is my Grim Fandango, as if
For
or
me, yeah.
Pete's Grim Fandango.
Yeah, because I spent 24 hours on that game. I'm sorry. I feel sorry for you
Yeah.
if this is your Grim Fandango. So Tom, you mentioned out of 226, but actually there are 228 cards, right? They're the two Phantom cards. I don't know if you guys are aware of that. There's like the
I'm
Mew
not.
and the Venusaur, and
Those are like the promo cards, right?
yeah, and so the
Yeah.
only way to obtain those legitimately is through the card pop feature, which actually we didn't mention yet. Um, so
Okay, go ahead.
basically, you could card pop with a friend, and you would both obtain a random card, and you can only do that once, which once with each friend, which isn't entirely true. I forget how many kind of data, how much data it stores, but I think maybe it's like maybe around 20, something like that. So if you card pop with 20 people, then it kind of the first person that you card popped with, sort of the data gets deleted, and you could card pop with that person again. So, but anyway, so I wanted to get into because this is like really really interesting in my
Before you
opinion.
get that, how yeah, what was the logistics of card popping?
It's
I think
like
it used the infrared sensor on the Game Boy Color, right? You would just
yeah, I think you're right.
kind
Like,
of like hold the two Game
uh,
Boys next to each other, and then they would like
uh,
wirelessly communicate with each other.
that's cool.
Or maybe
Yeah,
you had to use the casing cable that you use for treating. I'm not
Mhm.
exactly sure. I I thought this
Yeah.
was different, but I could be wrong.
No, I think it was I'm looking it up now, and it looks like the infrared ports had to be
Yeah.
connected. Each player would receive a random card. It says.
Yeah, so I think that this game was on maybe it was like the Wii Virtual Console or the 3DS or something, and this card pop feature was disabled. But then they re-enabled it for the Switch version, which obviously was through internet at that point.
Mhm.
And so Tom and I actually tried this, and we got pretty stinky cards.
Yeah, I don't even remember what I
Yeah,
got.
You did that recently, like this playthrough,
yeah,
or
this playthrough
Yeah,
just to try it.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, we didn't get the Mew or the Venusaur.
Now,
it worked though.
just for clarification on that point, Venusaur was already you could get him otherwise in this game as a regular
No,
card. This
it's a
oh,
different
it's a
Venusaur
different
card.
Venus. Okay, I was gonna say because otherwise that yeah okay.
And those were modeled after real life promo cards, right?
No, I think they were created for the game. Now, the Venusaur card was made into a physical card. The Mew never was.
Oh, so
Um,
afterwards it was. That's cool.
yeah, that's my understanding. And the Venusaur was actually packed with the player's guide for the game. So
Nice.
that Venusaur promo card. And so I was like kind of looking up prices for these cards actually. So for the Venusaur card. So for a PSA 10, and like I don't know, sometimes you don't realize how rare a PSA 10 is. Like to basically be unblemished, it was 1,500 approximately, like
Hmm.
priced at. For a PSA 9, it was 300. So like not
Wow.
not super valuable.
Yeah.
For ungraded, I saw $70 for an ungraded card that was, I guess, in decent condition.
Hmm.
Um,
Interesting.
yeah, and then kind of since I'm on this topic, before I get back to the card pop, the game itself was packaged with a promo Meowth card, right? Do you remember that, Tom?
Yeah, I do remember that. It was holograph. It was, yeah, a holograph, right?
Was it? Yeah, maybe it was. Yeah, I think you're right.
I think it had like a greenish background or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do remember that.
Yeah, so that card was approximate value ungraded is $10. For a grade 10, $700. For a grade 9, $70. So
Wow, that's
as
Yeah,
you could
it seems
imagine,
like
not that valuable.
I feel like those cards are probably like would be pretty rare nowadays, especially the Venusaur one. But
Yeah, the Venusaur one, which I guess was,
I
which is
guess
why it was
yeah, I don't
more
know. I guess these
valuable.
cards are just not really worth that much.
Yeah, well, I mean, if there was a Meowth card for every single game sold, it's pretty good amount of Meowth cards out there, you know?
yeah.
Yeah, but I feel like there was probably more of those. I don't know, like Charizard, for example, is always like the one that
Yeah.
is always like
Yeah, it's like
shown as the most expensive one for, whatever. But
yeah, well, it
uh,
doesn't have to do with rarity only too, because they were just as, or the Charizard card was just as rare as the Blastoise and the Venusaur card, for example. And Charizard card is more valuable just
true.
for
Yeah, I guess he's
popularity
more.
reasons.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's fair.
All right, I do want to hear, and I'm sure all the listeners want to hear Pete's other very interesting point that he was going to give us. But first, let's get to this week's mid-episode filler question. All right, for this week's mid-episode filler question, we have a trading card-based question for the audience and ourselves. Instead of a would you rather, we'd like to ask, what's your favorite of these three card games? Throw Pokemon in there as one of the choices. We're gonna ask Magic the Gathering, and we're going to include Yu-Gi-Oh as third. So give us your thoughts. You can find us on X or Instagram at Bros Boss Battles. That's BROS Boss Battles. You can visit our website at brothersandbossbattles.com. You can leave a comment there or anywhere you get this podcast on any service. So let us know your thoughts. If you've played any or all of those three tabletop card games, Pokemon Yu-Gi-Oh, or Magic the Gathering, let us know what is your favorite. So in essence, it is sort of like a would you rather question, but asked a little differently. Give us your thoughts, and we'll be happy to discuss that next episode. All right, now back to the regular episode. All right. Before the mid-episode filler question and segment, Pete was itching to tell us something very interesting about Pokemon trading card game, which we are discussing today. So, Pete, the floor is yours.
All right, great. So there will be some math involved in this discussion.
Oh, thank God.
I said there will be. But basically now this is probably hyperbolic. I don't know of anything else personally that would be considered a bigger gaffe from the developers than what I'm about to explain here. Let me start by kind of just explaining the background of how the card pop works. So at the start of the game, when when you're making your name, your character's name, the game will assign a random ID number to you, and then each letter in your name is there's a number associated with each letter in your name. So when you card pop, basically, I'm not sure if this is 100% true, but basically the game does some mathematical operation. So the game will subtract, I believe, the sum of all these numbers. So your ID number plus the number assigned to each letter in your name will subtract the sum of those numbers of your name from the sum of those numbers from your friend's name, the friend that you're card popping with. And that will determine the rarity of the card you receive. So a common card, uncommon card, etc. Now, if that number is exactly 5, like 5 seems to be an arbitrary number that they picked, but if it's exactly 5, the rarity of the card is determined to be Phantom, one of the 2 Phantom cards. Now, to get exactly 5, it's a 0.39% chance. So it's quite small chance. But if you're one of the lucky ones and it happens to be you match up with your friend and you get exactly 5, now you're going to get one of the 2 Phantom cards. So next, the game has to decide which of the 2, either the Mew or the Venusaur, you will receive. So in order to do that, it does a second operation. So it uses an exclusive OR, which is a bitwise operation. So essentially, it's putting values in a series of ones and zeros. Now, I don't know the exact math behind it, but essentially, if the result is odd, the result of the sum of those ones and zeros, if it's an odd number, then Mew will be obtained. And if it's an even number, then Venusaur will be obtained. So hopefully you're following me so far. But here's the punchline. Here's the kicker. The developers happened to pick 2 operations that will always have the same parity. So they'll both always be odd or they'll both always be even. So if the first number has to be a 5, the second number is always going to be odd. So it's impossible to get a Venusaur. How dumb is that?
It's funny you mentioned that because when I was looking through the Bulbapedia before and we were talking about card pop, it mentioned there was a glitch where you couldn't get Venusaur, but I guess that's the glitch. It didn't
That's like,
explain it, but that's it.
yeah.
Wow.
I mean,
So,
come on, that is a big time gap.
so you can never collect every card in the game then, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, if you use cheat codes or
Oh, yeah,
whatever,
yeah.
you like it's in the game. It's just
Mm.
through legitimate means you can never obtain it, but it's in the code.
Yeah,
I don't know. When I
that's
read
pretty
that, I was
crazy.
like,
It's
oh
it's really interesting to think about how like software development has evolved over the years. Like, I mean, something like, if that happened nowadays, they can easily patch it, you know.
yeah, true.
But, they
Which just leads,
this was final, back
it,
then.
Yeah.
which I feel leads to the coolness of older retro games because it's like that will always be part of this now, and it's like You know,
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, no,
yeah.
totally.
it's always a talking
Errors and
point.
all. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I know. I always like hearing about these old things, like even with the N64 stuff, and we're talking about like stop and swap. Like it
Hmm.
seems like it would have been really cool to be a developer back in those days where you had to like be more creative with your implementing the features and stuff just
Yeah,
because of the limitations.
yeah. So not quite as cool, but I think it's a pretty well-known glitch, the down A glitch in the game. I don't know if you guys came across that. And actually, we were thinking about putting together a little video that kind of walks through the glitch. Um, and we'll post those on our social medias, I guess. But just to explain it here, um,
You
essentially
heard
when
it
you're
here first.
yeah, when you're in the like I think it's called in play screen, so which is it's essentially like the tabletop screen, so you could kind of see your active Pokemon and your bench Pokemon, and then also your opponents. Um, if you go to the lowest point of that screen, which if you have a bench Pokemon is going to be on you on one of your bench Pokemon, and then you press down and A essentially at the same time. Um, what I had read was that you would automatically exit the match, but I that is not what I experienced. So what I experienced is when you press that, you will go into the screen that shows your bench Pokemon. So you're on your bench Pokemon in the tabletop screen. Then you press down and A essentially at the same time, and that took me to, as you would expect, the the list of your bench Pokemon. Then you could select, move up and down and select whichever one you want. But what happened that shouldn't have happened was that when I tried to exit that screen by pressing B, it would kind of like flash or blink as if it was going to take me to a new screen, but it didn't. And so if I would just kind of press B a few times, then at that point I was automatically kicked out of the match, and they would declare a winner. And the winner is determined by essentially what was the result of the previously completed match. So, that was stored in the data as you either won or you lost. And then,
Mm.
so if you won one match, you essentially only had to win one match or one duel, excuse me, and then keep using that
Cheat.
glitch.
Mhm.
Oh
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah,
Yeah, we
that's.
should.
I wonder if I was gonna say like I wonder like was there any explanation like technically as to why that happened?
Yeah, basically, this also seems like sloppy developing, but there was a code or a menu, I don't know what you want to call it, that was meant to be inaccessible by the by the user, by the player, underneath the
Uh,
accessible bench, and I guess that code happened to store or
huh. There's
activate is
probably like there's something they added there to like for the UI, like an invisible thing, like just to push everything up or something. Like
okay,
I'm just
yeah.
thinking of hacks that I would do in my job.
Yeah, no, it must have been something along those lines. And so if you press the down and A at the same time real quick, you're basically accessing something that you weren't intended to access.
They're like, no one will press down and A at the same time in this game at all.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
weird
This
that they would
this is
make that
foolproof.
assumption. Yeah, I guess they
So
didn't really QA that much back in the day.
yeah. The all right, so we kind of went off on a tangent again. I kind of want to bring it back to a video game category as far as like replayability. What do you guys think? You guys both beat it, so what do you think about the replayability? Once you beat it, you have those legendary cards, right? So you can there is like another sort of battle area that you can take those cards to and continue.
Oh, is there a like a end game?
Yes, yeah, there is. It was
So
it
there's
was called
the
the
challenge
Challenge
hall.
Machine. Dr. Mason's
Oh,
Challenge
oh,
Machine.
oh, right.
So
Yeah.
you would fight random battles. So it was like three club members, one club master, and one grandmaster, like randomly selected. And like it'll tally your consecutive win streak, I think. To me, that's not really motivating. Like I don't really want to do that.
What about the challenge hall? Because that you can go to that you just face matches too, right?
Yeah, so that challenge, I think it's called Challenge Cup Hall. That those challenge cups, I guess, are held periodically or randomly or periodically throughout the regular game. And that's how you get some of the promo cards.
Ah,
And then after you complete the game, I believe those tournaments, those cups, um, continue to happen periodically.
I
So,
see.
that's so then you could kind of get more of the promo cards
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's the to me the most obvious replay value if you consider it that. Once you beat the Grandmaster as your rival, you probably don't have all of the cards yet. So you maybe want to go back and collect them all.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like I was missing quite a bit, like 40, 45, 46 cards. So
Yeah, I was missing like
yeah.
30, I think.
But then even just like starting a new game, you could play it very differently than your original playthrough. So I mean, I think there's replayability in that sense too.
Yeah, and whenever you have like the collect the cards kind of thing or collect the Pokemon, you can increase the replayability of you know any sort of game like this.
Yeah, people who enjoy the game, I've read do that a lot where they'll replay with maybe imposing their own restrictions or rules or just playing it differently like Tom mentioned. Like maybe like so one thing I wish there was like a penalty for losing. Maybe you have to give up a random card or something. So I've read people who do that. If they lose, then they take out one of their cards from their deck, then they can't use it anymore.
Yeah. An interesting thing I wanted to bring up to you guys and the listeners is that I actually lost a match once because I ran out of cards in my deck. Did you guys ever even come
That
close to?
happened to me once. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
really? Okay.
so yeah, I have two comments here. So that happened to me in the when I was fighting the Psychic Club
Hmm.
leader.
I think that's where it happened to me.
Yeah, because he had who was it? It was either like Chansey or Kangaskhan, one of those where he just left them out. And at that point, I didn't remember that you lose the match if you run out of I if you run out of cards. I just thought that they would like kind of shuffle your discard pile back and you would just continue drawing.
That's what I thought. Yeah.
Yeah, so like I didn't know that. So yeah, I ended up losing once there, and that was annoying because that obviously was a long match, and then it's like, oh,
Yeah.
it's just over and I lose.
But I forgot how
But
like I was able to make it go that long. Like maybe I had like a Professor Oak card and you draw another 7 cards, you discard your cards and then
yeah,
also
Yeah.
with like Alakazam, he's able to the Pokemon power is to like allocate his hit points to other bench Pokemons. So I think that elongated like the
yeah,
amount of time
yeah.
he was out.
I think like if yeah, he probably had Pokemon on the bench who had a lot of HP, so he can just like, keep filling them up. Yeah, but another point that I wanted to mention regarding that is the last fight against Ronald. I won because he ran out of cards.
Oh wow. I almost beat someone for them running out of cards, but like the match ended with like them having 1 or 2 left. I was like, ah.
Yeah, it's
Oh
just it's kind of lame to have like I don't know. I guess the AI wasn't programmed that well because
yeah.
they should have not been so greedy with the card drawing. Because I feel like with Ronald, I think he one of his legendary bird Pokemon did something, had a special move, a Pokemon power where you're able to, I think, like draw cards or something.
Well,
So
the yeah, Moltres can draw fire cards like from throughout the deck.
yeah. I think that, and I think he might have been abusing that, and then so I was just like, okay, keep doing that, and
That's cool.
then yeah, that was the most anticlimactic final battle in Pokemon history.
Did that happen when you originally played it back in the day, or just this run
No, no,
through?
just
Oh,
this
okay.
most recent one.
Yeah, that is cool.
Yeah, that never happened to me where I or my opponent ran out of cards.
Mm.
But going back to the AI was pretty pretty bad a lot of times. So there was like one time where I had Ghastly, so this was early on, and I used Destiny Bond, I think, which basically if he's killed in the next turn, then the Pokemon that attacked him also dies. And so I used Destiny Bond, and then they killed me, and I forget if it was either their last Pokemon or they only had one. I only had one prize card left, so I won. But like, basically any human would just not have attacked me. And like, you have to discard an energy card when you use that Destiny Bond, so you can't just keep spamming it every single turn.
Okay, okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, I honestly, I don't know. I thought the AI was pretty good. Like I mentioned briefly that Articuno thing where they would use the trainer card where they put it back in the deck and then get it back out so that he would use his Pokemon power of freezing the your Pokemon that was out at that time. Like so they use that very strategically. I don't know. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah,
They seem to
It
be
seems like they had
strategic
a lot of like pre-programmed
strategies.
strategies.
moves to
Yeah.
do,
Yeah.
or yeah, strategies. So some of them seem smart, but then at other, like, when you get to those points where those weren't really effective strategies, it just kind of was like
Yeah,
they're
I
just going to do it
guess.
anyway because that's what they were
Yeah.
programmed to do.
Yeah. It's on the checklist. All right, anything to add before we give our final thoughts? We hit all the
It,
major we talked about graphics, we talked about music, talked about replayability. I mentioned the plot, but it's nothing to write home about, but it's, sort of classic Pokemon. Um,
I did want to bring up one last thing.
yeah.
I was curious if you guys came across this Imakuni guy.
Yeah. He's like involved, he's based on a person that was involved in the making of the game, correct?
Yeah, he was involved in aspects of the trading card game. I think he did illustrations
Hmm.
for some of the cards. But so I didn't actually come across him in the this last most recent playthrough. Like I mentioned, I started even like skipping those some of those optional rooms and just going straight to the club leader. So I think that's probably why I missed him. But when I was going back and just like looking up some info on the game, I remembered seeing him and you know dueling with him back when we originally played on the Game Boy. So I guess yeah, I was just curious if like
Yeah, I
anyone
did.
battled him this time around and if he gives you anything useful, like if he has any like exclusive cards, I guess.
I remember battling him. I remember him not being too problematic for me to defeat. I don't remember specifically what he gives you though.
Yeah, I think he gives you a trainer card that's what is it, Imikumi or whatever his name is. He gives you like his trainer card, and it does something that's like I forget, but it's like stupid, and you would never want to use it.
Uh oh yeah, I see. Your active Pokemon is now confused. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
But so that would be, I guess, well, yeah, just for collector's sake.
collecting. Yeah,
If
Right,
yeah.
right.
yeah. So one thing I wanted to mention was like the club master like shtick kind of thing was like very lame, like all of them. And I know they're trying to sort of just not make the game duel, like go on to the next duel, win, go on to the next duel. But like the fighting club one wouldn't duel you, the club master, unless you defeat all three members, but they were training in different clubs. Like
Yeah, yeah.
that was kind of dumb. I mean, the fire club wouldn't duel you unless you had a certain number of cards. And like, oh, the grass one was was the lamest one. So you go to the grass club and I guess you fight the members, and then you're told that she's at Ishihara's house. So then you go to Ishihara's house and she's there and she's like, "Oh, you want to duel me? Well, I only duel at my club." And she goes back to the club. So then you go back to the club. It's like, is there a developer out there that's like getting his jollies knowing that everyone like playing has the minor inconvenience of leaving the club, going to Ishihara's house, and then going back to the club to duel her? Like it was like just so dumb. All those like clubmaster sticks were really like just very minor inconvenience things just to try to do something to make it like I don't know, add a
Yeah.
little something to the game.
Yeah,
guess
yeah. The fighting one was annoying, where you had to go to the
yeah,
different clubs.
and like
Yeah.
find them because you really didn't
Yeah,
know what
yeah,
club they were in.
yeah. Exactly. That
I
was the
mean,
annoying part.
not that's the not that it's that hard, but I mean, it's like I like the fact that you weren't traversing, and like that. I guess that was the filler for not having to traverse. Is like you
Yeah,
really sort of
exactly. Exactly. It didn't really add anything. So just a couple other minor things. There was, and I think I kind of was conflating issues in the previous episode where we talked about Pokemon Snap, but there was a peripheral where you could print the cards on a piece of paper with the Game Boy printer.
Yeah,
You know, I don't think we ever did that. I don't
I don't think we
I
had
don't
that
see that
that
that's a
peripheral.
yeah, you're right. We didn't. I don't really see it as that appealing.
No, I mean, especially when you can just get the real cards.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And then there was a sequel to this game, but it was only released in Japan. The best theory that I saw as to why it wasn't released in North America or outside Japan was that it was basically released around the same time as the next gen, as the Game Boy Advance was being released. So I don't know, just there was a decision that it wouldn't be successful and just wasn't released outside Japan.
Yeah. So while we're talking about sequels, you know, nowadays they have like Pokemon Trading Card Online, which is basically just battling people using digital versions of the current cards. They have like this whole arena set up on, you know, online with cool graphics and stuff. I actually played a few matches of that fairly recently, within the last year, I guess. Um, that's pretty cool. I mean, the game has changed quite a bit from when the Game Boy game was popular. Now they have like all these crazy evolutions, and
Mhm.
I guess that kind of ties into like the mainline RPGs too, where they have these crazy evolutions
Yeah,
now.
mega evolutions.
Mega and yeah, so they have like EX cards and something else.
Did they have
But
like
but yeah,
every generation?
yeah, I mean, they obviously they make Pikachu every generation, but yeah, they have others, like of the popular
How do you
ones.
collect, not to interrupt, but how do you collect cards in this?
Yeah, does it store it like under a profile that you can use, or is it
Yeah, so
just
you have a profile, but so like when you go out and buy like actual physical booster packs now, it comes with the card that has a promo code, and then you put that code in on your online account, and you get those cards digitally too.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah,
hmm.
Is that how you have to do it though? You need
I
the
think you can
physical cards,
actually buy
digital cards.
digital cards.
Huh,
So it's
that's lame.
yeah, but I'm sure people do it.
Yeah.
No, I mean, just
Okay.
like, in any game, like,
Yeah, yeah.
any game that has microtransactions, like mobile games and whatnot, like, these pay to win kind of things. But anyway, yeah, so it's kind of cool.
Yeah, that
That's
is
kind of
And
like a
cool.
like,
sequel. Yeah.
yeah, and it's like still going to this day, the Pokemon trading card game, still having, tournaments and that, for lots of money and stuff. So,
One thing I actually did want to bring up that I don't think you guys agree with me, but I kind of liked in the RPG games where you had four moves, whereas in the card game you only have one or two moves per Pokemon. So, I guess that becomes more important when you have all of these additional, classes of characters where are weak and strong, and the specific moves could be weak or strong against the Pokemon, as opposed to just being used by a certain type of Pokemon. So I guess it became more important in those games to have more than two moves, but I kind of like that. It gave options. You could have a water Pokemon that had two water moves, an ice move, and a basic move or something. And I like that, but I guess it wasn't really necessary for this game. But I guess just being a fan of Red and Blue, and that being my first experience and sort of like the baseline for Pokemon for me, that was always sort of that was something I didn't love.
Yeah,
I don't.
I can't say I had the same thought. Maybe just being very familiar with it. cards. I just knew and expected there would be, 2 moves.
Yeah, I had the same thought. I mean, it's Pete. Whereas, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I wouldn't have expected it probably like is even just too much text to fit on a card.
Yeah, yeah.
Just like when they were designing these, they were probably like, nah, 4 is gonna be too much due to aesthetics more than anything else.
All right. Anything else? If not, let's do some final thoughts. Tom, why don't you start us off and
Yeah,
recommendation?
so I like this game. I think it's. I mean, I don't think it's like a must play. If you're like someone who's a little younger, maybe now, and you're like just and you're into the current iteration of Pokemon trading card game, I think it could be cool to go back and see what the original game was like. Just to see the changes, and it was a bit simpler back then. There was no Pokemon who had like now some of them have like well over 200 HP and whatnot. So I think that could be a cool experience for people. Um, as just for like the average person, I don't I don't know that I would really recommend this. It might be something, fun to do when you're, I don't know, like on a train ride or something like that, a long car ride or a plane ride or something. Just my any form of transportation, really. Uh, just as
While
long as you're
you're,
not the one driving.
I was gonna say while you're driving.
When you're like on your skateboard or something. No, but it's something to kill time. It might be fun if you're like into Pokemon, but if you're not, then I wouldn't say that this is something that you got to play.
Yeah, I can't say I hated this game, but it was very frustrating at points for me, and it kind of had that a little bit of that luck element to it. It's Pokemon, it's Gen 1 Pokemon. That speaks to me. It was cool not having played the card game to experience the card game really for the first time by playing this game. And yeah, you didn't have a mess of cards with you. You were able to do it digitally and electronically. So I like it for that. And I think it's a decent game despite its frustrations. I have to give it more points now knowing that you could speed up the text and the battle animations. I wish I had known that when I was playing, but the fact that that's in there as an option is very helpful and a great choice to be able to make. But my recommendation is going to be similar to that of Pokemon Snap. If you're a Pokemon fan, I would say play it. Uh, you know, Pokemon fans, I think, love the nostalgia and love the lore and can get into old games even if they're new players. So I would say give it a shot. I suppose if you're a, another category of player that maybe doesn't love Pokemon but loves card-based games, whether they be tabletop or video games, maybe give it a shot. It's got to be one of the more popular card-based games, so I'd give that a shot. But for the other people that don't fit within one of those two circles, I would not recommend this. I think it would frustrate people that don't like card games, and I think it would not really do much for non-Pokemon fans. So those are my final thoughts. Pete, why don't you finish us off?
Yeah, I want to echo your point about Pokemon fan, non-Pokemon fan. I feel like a lot of these Pokemon spin-off games are, if they weren't Pokemon, are kind of not that great, but because they're Pokemon, they're awesome. So, now this game is actually a little different in that you may have been a huge Pokemon fan, had all the games, all the merchandise, all the cards, but you just kind of collected the cards and never actually played the the card game. You know, for those people, I would recommend the game 100%, just to just to learn and understand how the game was played. I think it is like, not to sound super nerdy and make it all important, but it is a part of history, gaming, video game history, or Nintendo or Pokemon history. And we had never, Tom and I, we didn't really play the proper game, even though we collected the cards a ton. And so I was happy to have played this game just in that sense, to learn what the trading card game was in its original form. Now, having said all that, the game is pretty flawed and honestly not that fun. So, like, for example, there were exactly 2 duels that came down to the wire when I played, and there were a handful of more that were, not down to the wire, but still kind of up in the air. So, like, conservatively, I would say 9 out of 10 duels were basically like determined after the first handful of draws. So it kind of made the game very tedious and just not exhilarating or thrilling in any way. So if you were a big Pokemon fan and aren't familiar with the mechanics and the rules of the game, I recommend it. For anyone else, it's a no recommend.
All right, thanks, guys. There you have it. Pokemon trading card game, the second of our Pokemon spin-off category. Be sure to tune in next episode for our third and final Pokemon spin-off game review and discussion, all leading to the all-important throwdown where these Pokemon spin-off games will go up against each other and we'll pick a winner. Visit our website at brothersandbossbattles.com and our social media on X and Instagram at Bros Boss Battles. That's BROS Boss Battles. Or leave us a comment wherever you get this podcast. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.